We get back to work on this door panel. Seems like we keep going backwards instead of forwards on this project, but lately that's the way it's been. One of the things we were having trouble with is deciding what to do in this area where the latch mechanism is. And the primary reason for that is that inside the door, there's an L-shaped piece of material with 3 holes in it that are threaded, and the screws that hold the door latch on thread into that plate. Now, if you take all of the screws out of the plate, then the plate doesn't stay in place. It's just like a big backing plate in there. So I was trying to determine how we would accommodate that. And what I've seen, at least what it appears to me, is that the latch, the door panel, let's say, is not cut out here. The door panels are made to come to the edge, and the latch essentially holds the door panel in place at that point. And what they do, it looks like to me, is instead of having screws in there like what we've done, is to put studs in that plate, and the studs stick through the whole shooting match, the door panel and everything, and then there are nuts inside that hold the latch in place, and then of course the 2 screws that hold the cover on. So in order to do it, that makes a lot more sense. I don't know what keeps the studs from unscrewing themselves when you go to take the whole shooting match apart, but that's another story. I think what we'll do is probably put a little Loctite on those studs when we fit them into place. We're going to have to make those, and we're going to have to make those based on how thick everything is. This particular spacer that I made is too thick, so by the time we put our door panel on there and upholstery, we're going to need a shim here or a backer about half of what we have now, and that's okay. We got our new ABS material in. We're going to get that out of the package here pretty soon, and we've got to get back here and finish trimming our template down a little bit. One of the things that I saw in what I was looking at is this area right here where the door comes up to a peak and then drops around, and I think on our panel we're going to have to round that a little bit. Instead of having it come to a peak, it's going to have to be rounded in here a little bit, because by the time you get the material in there and everything, and then they use a hide-em up there to fasten the whole thing on, you're not going to be able to replicate that sharp peak right there. We'll get the camera up here a little bit. That sharp peak there. But we've still got, on this thing, since we haven't done much work on it, we've still got to trim it down. It's a little big on the bottom side. Excuse me. A little big on the inside here. And we just go ahead and make this pattern just a little smaller, and then transfer that to our ABS and cut the ABS out and go from there. The first thing we're going to do is locate these 4 holes and get those studs in there so that this panel fits over those studs and gives us a way to hold our latch in place. Inside the door, you have this L-shaped piece of material with threaded holes, and let me see how that, I believe it goes like so, or it may probably goes like so. And you've got these 3 screws that thread into this piece. and that's what holds the door latch in place. Pretty thick. It's pretty near 1/4 inch thick, but it just sits in there. There is a little bracket that kind of keeps it from falling out and falling all over the place. But for the end of the day, it just kind of sits in there. So I think for the 4th hole here, you just run a wood screw into the door itself, so that's not an issue. But that's that L-shaped bracket that's inside the door. So we're going to have to make 4 studs that go through everything and screw into that plate and then stick out through the door panel, and the latch fits over top of that. It's so typical with this project, probably a lot of different ones, that even the simple job turns out to be aggravating. So what we have now, we've taken all this apart, and as I said before, we have a metal plate back here that is the backer for the door latch. So what we've done is we've made some studs to screw in there, and what we find is that somewhere along the line, somebody with the best of intentions has gone and drilled these holes out oversized for whatever reason and put slugs in there and then re-drilled the holes. So of course, when they did that, they drilled the holes on some kind of an angle, which means when you put studs in there that they come out on all kinds of different angles, and the door latch doesn't end up sliding over all 3 of the studs. The other thing that they did, when they put those slugs in there, the slugs were too long. They were thicker than the piece of material than they put them in, so they stick out the back, and when they stick out the back, it keeps the metal plate from mounting flush to the back side of the wood. So just, you know, somebody decided they were fixing something and they just made it worse. So I think the first thing that I discovered is that this edge here is not in line with the outer edge here. So what I did was put these studs in there and put a nut on there and hold them, to pull that up, tighten it in place. And then for this other one, I think I'm not going to put a stud in there because it's just, you can see it's even hitting in the edge of the door over here. And we'll use this spacer I made as an example. So that's going to slide over that like so. And if by putting those nuts on there, now this door latch is reasonably parallel rather than being on an angle, because this surface is farther back than that surface. And I still have enough stud there to hold things. So then if we get our door latch and we slide that on, now we've got to put a nut there and a nut there. And I don't know what kind of a little tiny nut we got to find, but there's hardly room for a nut there. So what I'm going to do here is put a countersunk screw in this hole, and the nuts on these two, probably going to have to, I have put a cotter pin in here to keep that plunger in place. I'm probably going to have to do something else with that because there's just barely enough room to get a nut on there. But I think if I do it that way, so then there'll be a wood screw down here and a long metal screw into the plate there, and then 2 nuts over here, and then of course you get the cover over the whole thing, and that should hold everything in place. But you know, it's just turned into a 5-minute project turned into a couple of hours by the time it was all done. Once we've got that metal plate where we want it and the studs and everything, then they have this little retention piece that slides in behind it and then nails into the side here, ostensibly
keeps it in place, but it doesn't really, because it can still slide up and down. So it's a nice a nice thought, but it really doesn't do much. Well, after a lot of monkeying around, we got our fiberboard pattern pretty well fitted. Got to keep trimming it to give ourselves a perimeter. And we've got our piece of ABS that we're going to have then traced the outline of our pattern on the ABS. I mean, if we'd had the ABS to start with, we could have skipped the fiberboard portion of it, but we just got this ABS in here. This has got a textured finish on one side and smooth on the other. It's fairly rigid, more rigid than I had hoped, so I don't know if we're going to be able to staple to it, but we can certainly glue to it. And we may just, for the time being, leave this textured black finish as the inside. I might see if it'll take some green paint, and we could leave it that way. Or I've got some foam, and we might be able to get some green vinyl or leather and cover the door panels. I hadn't really planned on an interior kit on this project until the very, very end. So, you know, leaving the door panel sort of ABS is a quick and dirty option that'll at least cover up the ugly inside of the door. And I might just go ahead and get some green vinyl to match the seats and go ahead and pad the door panels and make them just so it looks a little nicer. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Well, after a lot of juking around, we have our moment of truth, as it were. We've got our piece of ABS, nice flexible plastic, and traced our masonite panel around it and got it trimmed to the right size. So we'll see how it fits, if it does. Kind of using these latch mount screws as a guide. So we'll see. I had a nut here, but there it is. Fumble fingers can get the. Let me see if we can get our screw to go in there where it's supposed to go. What we're doing there, something dumb. Okay, so let's see, we may have a screw right here. Looks like it lines up. Got two in the bottom. I'm not going to put them in right now, but I think we're okay. Got a little bit of relief at the top and a little bit around the edges for the material to wrap over. One of the things that I have learned is that there is a bit of, here we call it windlace that goes across the top of the door, but it also goes in here around the door opening and up here and up over behind the dash, between the dash and the scuttle, and down around the other side. Apparently it's all one piece. Well, obviously this isn't one piece, but there's a piece goes on top of the door, and in theory that'll seal that little edge up there and give you a little rolled upholstered edge to rest your arm on, I guess, when you're hanging your arm out the door. And then in theory it seals the door around here. I don't know why you got to worry about sealing the door when there's no top, but so they do it. Well, what I've learned is you can't buy that wind lace separately. We have lots of wind lace available that's cloth. I really don't want cloth. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Vinyl would be fine. Leather would probably be better, but you know, a bit of green vinyl would be fine. Probably what I'm going to have to do, and I mean, you can buy that, but you have to buy the whole interior kit to get it. What I'm probably going to have to do is have a local upholstery guy make me up a piece for the top here and a piece for the dash, and I'm going to have to put some thought into putting it down here inside the door opening. You know, this is not a museum project here. The whole point of this exercise was to take a pile of parts and put it together and get a running and driving car. And there's a big difference between a running driving car and a showpiece, and we just haven't done things in a manner that you would do if you were doing a restoration or a showpiece. But I'm happy with this door panel. It's kind of, I think we need another. We put 2 pins in there. That's probably going to be okay. It'll take that. We may even put one here, one here, one here, one here. The latch will hold it over here. We're just going to have to see, you know, in theory, for just a fun car, you could really leave this material. It's textured. I think you could probably buy some paint that's specifically made for plastic, paint it green. I think we're going to go to the trim shop where the upholstery, the upholstery or the cloth store, I don't know what you can call it, it's where all the ladies go to buy all their material. They have some vinyl over there, marine grade vinyl, and see maybe if we can find some green vinyl and maybe we'll cover this door. We'll see. But for right now, I'm happy with that material. That is probably going to outlast the car, that piece of material right there. So that's that worked out okay. Now we've got to go ahead and do the other door, and like everything else, no 2 doors are probably the same, so we'll start with our wooden pattern, see how it fits, and modify it to fit the other door, and then make one of these for the other side. But we've been slow on this year on getting videos out for this project. You know, we're down to dinky little jobs, so sometimes we do stuff and it's not worth recording. Sometimes we don't do anything at all. So, you know, that's the problem. We really need to get back on this thing and get it on the road. The warm weather's coming. Be nice to get it down on the ground and see if it moves.